10 most dangerous spiders in the world. There are around 50,000 species of spiders on the planet, and their dangerousness is not necessarily determined by their size. Both big and small are capable of perpetrating the most painful and deadly bites. Don't let fear invade you, and get ready to meet the 10 arachnids that bring the greatest terror in the world. Number 10. Mouse spider. This 8-legged Australian creature is named after the creepy, hairy abdomen that resembles a rodent. 17 species have been identified in total, and they range between 0.39 and 1.37 inches in length. They live near water channels, and depending on the time, they stay in their burrows, waiting for prey, or they also go out to wander without destination. Knowing this, you must walk more attentive than ever so you don't cross with this arachnid, who will not hesitate to use its huge fangs that have a poison similar to that of the fearsome Sydney funnel spider, which is potentially dangerous. If they feel threatened, they will unleash their fury, and that can lead to death, because they have a high level of toxicity. Its poison affects the nervous system and spreads rapidly throughout the body. After the bite, if the symptoms are immediate, a doctor should be called in order to apply the corresponding antidote. If there are no effects, consider yourself a lucky one because you only received one dry bite, that is, without poison fluid. Number 9. Yellow sac spider. With an innocuous aspect and a small body that can measure up to 0.39 inches in length, this spider is considered responsible for the majority of bites that happen in the world because it lives in many parts of Europe and Central Asia. It is light yellow to yellowish green, and to the naked eye, it seems transparent, so it is also called the phantom spider. It is a fierce hunter who comes out of its silk sac to look for its prey, which can be another type of spider or insect. Sometimes, in the face of food shortages, it can even become a cannibal and eat its own eggs. Surprising! The sac spider owes its high danger to its frequent contact with humans, its eventual bad mood, and the poison it possesses. A cytotoxin that is capable of breaking down cells, causing necrosis. Its bite produces a sharp pain, causing the affected area to swell, creating undesirable blisters that can leave you scarred.
This is your 2-minute warning. This is your 2-minute warning.
The plump animal is a blue-tongued skink. It's a tasty treat for birds of prey, snakes, and larger lizards. It frightens potential predators off by puffing up its body and displaying a vivid blue tongue inside a bright pink mouth. The blue tongue has been wise to seek cover. One of Australia's top predators is on the hunt. This is a Parenti, a 2-meter-long monitor lizard. A large mulga snake would make a satisfying meal.
Thank you very much. At my direction, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is issuing guidance for communities of faith. Thank Dr. Redfield and the CDC for their work on this matter, and all the other work they've been doing over the past what now seems like a long period of time. Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. Some governors have deemed the liquor stores and abortion clinics as essential, but have left out churches and other houses of worship. It's not right. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. I call upon governors to allow our churches and places of worship to open right now. If there's any question, they're going to have to call me, but they're not going to be successful in that call. These are places that hold our society together and keep our people united. The people are demanding to go to church and synagogue, go to their mosque. Many millions of Americans embrace worship as an essential part of life. The ministers, pastors, rabbis, imams, and other faith leaders will make sure that their congregations are safe as they gather and pray. I know them well. They love their congregations. They love their people. They don't want anything bad to happen to them or to anybody else. The governors need to do the right thing and allow these very important, essential places of faith to open right now for this weekend. If they don't do it, I will override the governors. In America, we need more prayer, not less. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today. That was a great announcement from President Trump. I'd like to introduce Dr. Birx right now. She has a wonderful presentation pursuant to Reopening America and some great data to share with you, so I'll let her take this on. Thank you. Kelly, if you can have the first slide, please. I wanted to start out with a summary of the number of Americans we have lost to date. But the exciting thing for all of us is the decreasing mortality over time. And I think it both is a real aspect of the amazing healthcare workers on the front line, the ability of people to share at the front line how best to care for the patients, and the continuous decrease in mortality over time. Next slide. The other thing that has decreased significantly over the last month is new hospitalizations. We can see now that there's over a 50% decline in new hospitalizations. Although every region of the country is different, we are encouraged to see these new hospitalizations declining. Next slide. I've talked before about the extensive surveillance that CDC has made available to this country. This is looking at their syndromic surveillance from emergency rooms. You can see that both COVID-like illnesses shown in the orange and shown in the blue influenza-like illness, taking up both of those cases together, you can see significant declines week over week. A number of people coming to the emergency room with these illnesses. It goes along with our new hospitalizations. What we like to do is triangulate data, put data together from multiple sources to see if we're seeing the same trends so that we can ensure that we're making progress together. Next slide. This is their influenza-like illness surveillance system that has been up and running for more than a decade now. You can see each of the influenza peaks of this last year. I think that's very important to remind people of because we had influenza A, influenza B, and then we had COVID-like illness. And while we know it's COVID, that's the last orange peak. What we really find encouraging is across the country, we are below baseline. Why is that particularly important? Now, these are reported state by state, county by county. So each county will be able to see precisely where they are. And then if there's changes in this, it becomes yet again an early alert system. So I've showed you two early alert systems. One of them, emergency rooms visits based on our syndromic illness qualifications that the CDC has up on their website. And then the influenza-like illness. And again, to the American people, all of these are available on the CDC website under COVID-19 cases and surveillance. Next slide. Now, I want to show you, I'm going to go through these very quickly. This is where we started. This is influenza-like illness. The red, and the darker the red, the more significant the influenza-like illness is in that state. So you want to get to green. So this is the week ending March 28th. I think many of us can remember what that week was. And this was when we were at the very beginning of our acceleration into logarithmic phase. Next slide. This is April 4th. You're starting to see some of the states already turn green. Next slide. April 11th, more of the country. Next slide. April 18th. Next slide. April 25th. Next slide. May 2nd. And you can see, and I really call your attention to, there's a orange area on this slide. And you can see that it's the Maryland area. And we've been calling that out for a while, the high plateau in Maryland. You can also see Minnesota and Wisconsin. Next slide. And then you can see Wisconsin still. You can see Maryland is yellow. Next slide. I want to turn just a moment, and I know that took you through a lot of slides quickly, but I think we can see as a country, we have decreasing amount of illness, both at the emergency room and reported through the influenza-like illness. 2 of the surveillance systems that the CDC has up and running, these come from the states, they come from the counties, and many of the states have these also on their websites. We talked earlier about how we had prioritized testings to the area that had the most significant disease. And you can see now Rhode Island has led all of the states. It's almost up to testing 12% of all of their citizens. It's followed by New York. You can't see New York, but that's the very next one. New York, and then North Dakota. And so you can see that, well, you could. Yeah, you can see that most of the high burdens areas of the United States had more than 6% testing. That's when I think you heard from Admiral Giroir, we wanted every state to test at least 2% of their population during May. You can see 100% of the states now are over 2% of their population. And we'll fix this slide so you can see every state, but many of the states now are over 4%. And this is just after getting all the materials to ensure that they have adequate transport media and swabs. So we're encouraged by the progress that many of the governors and states have made in their testing of their population. It is also why we took the opportunity to really encourage governors, and it was to encourage governors to test 100% of the nursing home residents and staff, because many of our outbreaks that we have seen over the last 2 months have started in nursing homes. Next slide. Now, this is a complicated slide, but this is trying to show you how we triangulate data. So I took you through our surveillance systems. I've taken you now into the start of how we use laboratory data to really understand what's happening both in the metros and at the state level. This is every single state, and you can see the triangles, the top part that you can see, the little triangle-y pieces of the diamonds. That is where the states were in the number of positive tests. This is the nucleic acid test. This is diagnosing virus in your nose. You can see where it was 30 days ago and where it is now by the red squares. You can see a dramatic decline across the states. And indeed, New York City just 6 weeks ago was almost 40%. It is now for the first time as a New York state under 10%. And so this is the progress that we're making in both expanding testing, finding more people, but ensuring that we're getting testing rates of about 10%. This line is 10%. So 42 states are now have less than 10% test positive on a rolling 7-day average. Now, again, I'm going to call your attention to the top 3 states. The top 3 states with the largest percent, and this is so you can all make your decisions about going outside and social distancing, potentially playing golf if you're very careful and you don't touch the flags and all of those issues, playing tennis with marked balls with just one other person, so you're only touching your ball. We found really people who enjoy sports have been able to really adjust to social distancing, but you can see the top 3 states are Maryland, the district, and Virginia. And so there is still significant virus circulating here. That is followed by Nebraska, Illinois because of Chicago, and what we've talked about before about Minnesota. So those are our top states as far as still having high number of test positives. When I say high number of test positives, they're all under 20%. If I had shown you this slide 4 weeks ago, half of the country would have been over 20%. So this also shows progress, but also very clearly about the region we're living in right now with disease. Next slide. Now, I wanted you to see this as a metro because that's just a state level. So we look at this in multiple different ways. The number one metro with the highest positivity rate is the District of Columbia, which includes Northern Virginia and Maryland, Montgomery County, and PG County. That is followed by Baltimore, Chicago, and Minneapolis. And so these are the places where we have seen really a stalling or an increase of cases, as in Minneapolis. You can see all the other metros are almost all exclusively below 10%. So we see this as great progress across the board in the metro areas. Next slide. So we also look at daily cases and daily case numbers. And I know that you all know that that's a very erratic, and it depends sometimes on how the tests were reported, how the case were reported. And so you often have to look at it over a 3 or 7 day period. This is looking at daily cases on a 7-day rolling average. You can see the number one at the top peak that has now come down dramatically is the New York metro area. Underneath that, you can see our concerns about Chicago and our concern in the yellow line of the Washington, D.C. area, because these are two areas that went through their logarithmic phase and are now at a high plateau with an unchanging number of cases day over day. That's the orange line and the yellow line. You can see that the daily case numbers per 100,000 are below the yellow
What up,
line
Kelly
and the
Barkus?
orange
How are
line
ya?
of Washington, D.C. and Chicago. And that's New York and Boston and many of the others. Providence is also up as a per 100,000. And that's the way we like to look at it because we can really then understand it in relationship to population. The other groups that have very low levels that once had a peak, this is Detroit, very low level now. This is Boston in the gray, which has come way down also. And you can see down here is Atlanta and Miami. Next slide. Now, sometimes, and I think recently there have been publications about where the world was before we started the Stop the Spread and before many states shut down. And just to take you back to that moment, on March 14th, before Stop the Spread, cool. This is showing New York.
Hello,
I didn't even
Kelly
put March 14th on there because New York on March 14th had less than 50
so the virus
reported.
is going down. That's a good thing.
Chicago had less than 10. Washington had less than 10. LA had less than 20. The large state
Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden sounded off on the Breakfast Club talk show, saying the choice for president should be an easy one for African Americans. It's become controversial. Watch.
You know, so much. That's really our time. I apologize.
You can't do that to black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years.
Well, let's bring in Fox News contributor Carl Rove. He, of course, is the former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to George W. Bush. Carl, good morning.
Good morning.
As noted, you worked in a White House that I covered, so you'll understand if I have to interrupt you rudely to get to President Trump in a moment or so. But in the meantime, we want to talk some presidential politics. First of all, your reaction to those rather remarkable comments.
Yeah, suggestion that you're not truly black unless you support Joe Biden for president. It's really unusual. People are not allowed to have independent thoughts. They have to be, if you're black, you have to be for Biden. Really unusual. There's another part of the interview that I also was struck by. He said, I get overwhelming support from the black leadership, young and old. every poll shows me way ahead. And it's not just, I hear this, oh yeah, all blacks are rich, Biden, but young guy, look at the polling data falling. Analysts say it's off by half. Come on, man, give me a little break here. This is where I come from. I mean, what was that?
Yeah.
I mean, little strange.
Simone Sanders, let's be fair to the Biden campaign. She just in the last few moments has started tweeting about this. Let's get two of them in there and get you to react. Vice President Biden spent his career fighting alongside and for the African American community. He won his party's nomination, earning every vote and meeting people where they are. And that's exactly what he intends to do this November, adding the comments made at the end of the Breakfast Club interview were in jest. But let's be clear about what the VP was saying. He was making the distinction that he would put his record with the African American community up against Trump's any day, period. Sounds like cleanup on aisle 3.
Yeah, and not particularly effective. Look, he should be saying I misspoke, because that was the candidate himself saying, if you're black, you got to support me. If you don't support me, you're really not truly black. I mean, that was a way over the top. But look, we've come to sort of expect this, and I read that other quote just because it's emblematic of the interview. I mean, I thought that when he got off the trail, because Ed, you and I have both been on presidential campaigns, particularly primary campaigns. You're in a different town every night. You're sleeping in a strange bed in a strange hotel. You're moving for, if you're the candidate, you've got a lot of pressure on you, a lot of things to do. I thought when he got back to Delaware that these kind of missteps and the inability to string together two sentences would disappear, because he's at home, he's able to walk downstairs and go to this rec room and face the camera. But it's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. And I think he needs to step back and maybe think about what he says before he says it.
And that might be an important point to underline what's happening in the polls right now. Let's quickly get through. Fox News poll, brand new one. Biden opens up 8-point lead, 48% to 40 over the president. You got to remember that's national, number one. Number two, you got to remember there are battleground polls that CNN and others have been pointing out that suggest the president is doing better in the battlegrounds that will decide this election. But secondly, men versus women in the new Fox poll found a massive gender gap. Biden leading by 20 points among women, the president leading by 7 points among men. React to any part of that, Carl, but I want to work it into what you just said, which is Joe Biden might be doing better in the polls because he's been in that basement, not commenting as much. Now when he comes out and makes the comments we've just played, does that have an impact on the poll numbers down the road, perhaps?
Well, it may. Look, first of all, a lot of polls show the gender gap. At this point, I like looking at sort of the average of all of the polls, and I like trying to see if the same thing sort of appears in polls, regardless of where they end up, whether it's a 3-point margin, 5-point margin, whatever. And yes, there's a gender gap in this election. Women tend to support Biden, men tend to support President Trump. I want to take a look, though. Let's be careful about this. The Biden-Trump gap, in late March, Biden was leading in the Real Clear Politics average by about 7 points. In April and early May, it dropped to 6. Early to mid-May, it was dropped to under 3. And now, even with the Fox poll, it's at 5.5. So Biden had a bump as he basically secured the nomination of the Democratic Party, and that began to erode. Now, the question is, we've now had 2 polls showing him with a double, with either an 8-point lead or an 11-point lead in the Quinnipiac. We have a bunch of other polls showing him with a 2 or 3-point lead. We need to sort of see where this settles out. But the fact of the matter is this race is going to be close. Neither man has a sustainable lead over 50. It tends to be low single digits. There's plenty of people who will yet to be decided. We're all focused on coronavirus right now. We're focused less on politics. It's going to be interesting to see as we begin to turn more to politics. Does Biden do better because people are hearing him more, or does he do worse because people are hearing him more? We don't know.
Are there gaffes that blow up in his face? Quick last thing. We've got a little bit of breaking news that just crossed. Joe Biden's accuser, Tara Reade. There have been new questions raised about whether she's been consistent in her account. We've heard some of that aired, but just in the last few moments, Doug Weider was the attorney for this accuser, Tara Reade, and he's now saying he and his firm no longer represent Tara Reade. Again, we got to get some more context and more facts here, but broadly speaking, Carl, this is something that's been out there as an issue, her sexual assault allegations. But now her attorney is saying, well, this firm is no longer representing her. Obviously, there could be a whole bunch of reasons why they change. People change attorneys. but there have been questions about her account.
Yeah, and in fact, yesterday we had, she had served as an expert witness in some trials, and we saw yesterday a series of stories of people going after her saying she overrepresented her credentials and was an untrustworthy witness, and they need to revisit all of those trials in which she served as an expert witness. So, it's a sign that, if you pop up in a high-profile thing like this, everything is going to be scrutinized and questions are going to be raised.
It is.
But nonetheless, yeah.
And real quick, I just want to get in another fact because I was trying to read the statement quickly and I didn't want to misquote it. But this attorney is saying the firm, by no means is this a reflection on whether then Senator Biden sexually assaulted Ms. Reed. On that point, our view is the same held by the majority of Americans. They cite a poll and they go on to say, we genuinely wish her well, hope that she as a survivor is treated fairly. We have and will continue to represent survivors regardless of the alleged predator's status or politics. So I just want to get that in, that they're saying this is no reflection on her allegations, the truth or the validity of it. Final point, Carl.
Well, it's still not going to be helpful to her case. I mean, it's going to cause people to speculate why they did this, and unless they spell out why they did it, it's not going to inure to her benefit.
All right, Carl, well, we appreciate you rolling with the breaking news.
I'm good. You too.
They're known as Marty's Miracles, dogs sentenced to death, brought
the former vice president growing, visibly testing a little bit after it was insinuated that he had not done enough to prioritize the black community.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. The world, I mean, come on. Take a look at the record.
Mike, how's that playing out this morning?
Well, Eamon, as you know, I've covered former Vice President Joe Biden for a long time, and without fail, I think he tends to get as feisty as you just saw him there, most when he feels like his record is being attacked in ways that are unfair. And this was a longer conversation in which they discussed a range of his past positions on the crime bill, on marijuana legalization, a number of other issues in which he was defending his past record. It's worth noting, for instance, Biden was the only Democratic candidate, one of the few who didn't agree to do an interview with the Breakfast Club during the primary. Well, we're seeing now, of course, the Trump campaign really pouncing quickly. One tweet calling it disgusting. We saw Don Jr. tweet calling this comment racist. I think it's important to put this into context as well. What this interview shows is the real disparity that while Joe Biden won the African-American vote pretty handily overall, in South Carolina, for instance, he won 75% of black voters over 60, but tied Bernie Sanders with voters under 30, and obviously a range in between. So work to do clearly for Joe Biden in communicating his message primarily to younger African-American voters.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, Mike Memley, thanks for that update.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.
Jack could do the real deal. He's a cross between MacArthur and elk jerky, and one of those machines that tests grip strength.
Whatever you say, nerd. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
You look fat.
From writer-director Jon Stewart. I like being behind the camera more than in front of it.
And cut.
Because when I wear makeup, I like to do it for fun. Get ready for the most irresistible comedy event of the summer in your home on demand.
What do you think of that right there? Sorry, not you, Dot.
From Focus Features. Why do we accept that this is the way the media and political parties spend money?
What do you think?
And who's really
Man, phone, social media, just blowing up. This morning, with everybody asking me about my take on this. Let me give you my take. I will be on Blaze later. I'm pretty sure that'll be a segment. We can't not talk about it. But I know there's so much I want to say, but I'm probably going to forget some things or whatever. But, man, check this out. For those that don't know, the interview with Charlemagne that was done by way of Joe Biden. And he was talking to Charlemagne, who was Hot 96. What does he do? Breakfast Club is the name of it. I think it's a radio show. And I'm guessing this was a part of it. And I'm not going to show the clip because I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Definitely with YouTube's very questionable monetization as of lately. But this